They didn't know I'd left the hearing aid on the nightstand on purpose. That's the only reason they thought I couldn't hear. My daughter's voice carried through the wall like it always had, sharp, certain, the way it sounded when she was organizing something that didn't belong to her. "We move on it Thursday," she said to her husband. "The memory unit at Pinecrest has one spot left, and I'm not losing it. She won't even understand what's happening until it's done." I sat on the edge of the bed, in the dark. My hands were folded in my lap. Outside, the November wind pressed against the window of the room I'd been given in my daughter's house, the small one at the end of the hall, the one her husband called the guest suite, as if the word suite changed what it was. I was 71 years old. I had spent 43 years teaching secondary school English in Guelph. I had corrected 17,000 essays, attended more parent-teacher nights than I could count, and raised 2 children on my own after my husband passed in 2008. I was not confused. I was not fading. And I was not going to a memory unit on Thursday. I got up and began to pack. It had started 3 months earlier, the way these things always do, not with one large betrayal, but with 100 small ones that only make sense in retrospect. My daughter Jennifer had called in August, her voice warm and carefully arranged. "Mom, the house is just too much for you now. You're alone. It makes more sense for everyone if you come stay with us for a while." Her husband Greg had even driven up from Mississauga to help me move boxes, smiling the whole time with that particular smile of his that never quite reached his eyes. I sold my house, the bungalow on Courtright Road where my children had grown up, where I'd planted hostas along the front walk and kept a vegetable garden in the back until the year my knees stopped cooperating. The sale came in at $412,000. Jennifer said she'd help me invest it. "Rates are terrible right now, Mom. Greg has a financial contact. We'll get you something with real return." I signed the transfer forms at the kitchen table while she made tea, and I remember thinking how easy it was to trust someone you'd known since they were 7 years old and afraid of thunderstorms. 3 days after the funds cleared, I started noticing things. My mail stopped arriving. Jennifer said she'd set up a redirect for convenience, that managing the post was one less thing for me to worry about. My TD account, the one I'd held for 30 years, showed 2 new names with full access. Jennifer said it was for emergencies. She'd helped me sign the paperwork at the branch and talked the whole time, so I never looked closely at what the forms actually said. The document turned out to be an enduring power of attorney, not just for emergencies, not just for one account, for everything. I found the copy by accident. I was looking for stamps in the drawer of the small desk they'd put in my room, the one pressed against the wall where the window didn't open, and there it was, a photocopy, my name at the top, my signature at the bottom, and a line I was certain I hadn't read. Authorizes the named attorney to act without restriction in all financial and property matters on behalf of the grantor. I put the copy back exactly as I'd found it. I didn't say a word at dinner. That was 3 weeks ago. I'd spent those weeks watching, listening, filling in the picture piece by piece, the way you do when you've spent decades teaching students to read between the lines of a text. I noticed Greg taking phone calls in the garage. I noticed Jennifer's laptop open to a real estate site with listings I didn't recognize until I realized they were in my old neighborhood, my house, relisted at a number 80,000 higher than what I'd received. I noticed the envelope from a place called Pinecrest Long-Term Care that Jennifer slid under a stack of catalogs when I walked into the kitchen. And then I heard Thursday. I packed quietly. I didn't take much. 2 cardigans, my winter coat, my medication, the folder I'd started keeping in the lining of my suitcase after I found the power of attorney. In that folder, the original sale agreement on my house, bank statements I'd printed at the library 3 blocks away during my Tuesday afternoon walks, a copy of the POA I'd photographed on my phone when Jennifer was at yoga, and a letter I'd written to myself that simply listed everything I remembered, dated and specific, in case I needed to prove later that my memory was fine. I also took Greg's copy of the Pinecrest intake form. If they were going to build a file on me, I was going to build one on them first. The clock read 11:40 when I zipped the suitcase closed. Jennifer and Greg were watching something in the living room. I could hear the television. I put on my coat, tucked my purse under my arm, and carried my shoes to the front door. The mat was new, one of those sensors that chirped when you stepped on it. I stepped around it. Outside, the cold hit me clean and hard. November in Mississauga doesn't negotiate. I stood on the driveway for a moment, looking back at the house. The lights were warm inside. It looked, from here, like a home. I turned and walked to the corner. The bus route I needed ran until midnight. I'd checked, on the library computer, 3 days earlier. The 19 would take me to the Cooksville GO station. From there, I could reach Union Station in Toronto by midnight. And from there, I could go almost anywhere. I sat in the back of the bus with my suitcase between my knees and my hands wrapped around my purse. An older man across the aisle was asleep against the window, his chin dropped to his chest. A young woman near the front was studying something on her phone, earbuds in, leg bouncing. No one looked at me. I was invisible the way women of a certain age always are, and for the first time in my life, I was grateful for it. At Union, I bought a coffee from a vending machine and sat in the main hall under the lights until the first morning train to Hamilton was announced. I had a sister-in-law there, Donna, my late husband's younger sister. We had stayed close after the funeral, then drifted the way people do when grief is the main thing you share. She still sent Christmas cards. She still called on my birthday. She was the only person I was certain Jennifer didn't have a number for, because Donna had changed phones 3 years ago and I'd never written the new number anywhere Jennifer could find. I called her from a payphone I found near the departures board, one of the last ones still working in the city. She answered on the 4th ring, voice thick with sleep but sharpening fast when she heard mine. "Eleanor," she said. "What's wrong?" It wasn't a question. That's how Donna had always been. "I've left," I said. "I need somewhere to stay tonight. Just tonight, maybe longer. I'll explain when I get there." A pause. Then, "There's a key under the ceramic frog by the back door. It's always been there. You know the address." I did. The train ride was 40 minutes. Donna was already up when I arrived, kettle on, porch light burning. She opened the door before I knocked and pulled me into the kind of hug that doesn't require explanation. Her kitchen smelled like coffee and old wood. She had a tabby cat named Louis who sniffed my suitcase and walked away unimpressed. "Sit," she said. "Talk." I talked for an hour. Donna didn't interrupt. She refilled my cup twice. When I finished, she leaned back and said, "Does Jennifer know where I live?" I thought about it. I'd never given her Donna's address, but people find things now. "I'm not sure," I said. Donna nodded slowly. "Then we move carefully. First thing tomorrow, you go to your bank. She has access to my accounts. Then you go and take it back." I slept in Donna's guest room under a quilt she'd made herself, squares of fabric in blues and grays. I didn't dream. I woke before 7 to the sound of the cat jumping off the bed across the hall, and I lay still for a moment, listening to the ordinary sounds of someone else's house. No footsteps checking on me. No one waiting to decide what came next. I got up and made tea. The TD branch in downtown Hamilton opened at 9. I was there when the doors unlocked, suitcase in the car Donna had lent me, folder in my hands. The branch manager, a woman named Patricia in her mid-40s with reading glasses on a chain, took one look at my expression and said, "Let's go somewhere private." In her office, I laid the documents on the desk. The power of attorney, the account access records I'd printed, the Pinecrest intake form with my name on it, describing cognitive decline I did not have. Patricia read everything without speaking. She was the kind of person who read carefully, and I appreciated that. When she finished, she looked up. "Mrs. Hartwell, do you recall signing this enduring power of attorney?" "I recall signing something at this branch 3 weeks ago," I said. I did not understand I was signing this. I was not given time to read it. The conversation was handled by my daughter. "Were you present and willing?" "I was present. I was not adequately informed, and I was never given a copy. Patricia pressed her lips together. Under Ontario law, I said, I understand I can revoke this at any time while I have capacity. I have capacity. I want to revoke it today. She nodded. We can absolutely do that. I'll also need to flag the account for a senior financial abuse review. That's our internal process. It doesn't mean anything punitive yet. It just means we track what happened. Good, I said. I want a full record. We spent 2 hours going through everything. Every transaction Jennifer or Greg had made on my behalf since the transfer. Automatic withdrawals I hadn't authorized. A payment to a contractor I'd never heard of. A transfer of $22,000 to an account in Greg's name marked investment management fees. A monthly withdrawal of $900 labeled shared household expenses for a house I hadn't chosen to live in and paid no rent to occupy. By the time we finished, my hands were steady, but my chest was very full. Patricia handed me a card. There's a referral I want to give you, she said. A legal clinic that works specifically with older adults and financial exploitation. No cost. They're familiar with these situations. She paused. This is more common than people realize, especially after a property sale. I took the card. I already knew it was common. I'd taught enough students to understand that people learn to exploit whatever weakness presents itself, and that grief and aging and trust are among the oldest weaknesses there are. The legal clinic was on James Street North, above a pharmacy. The lawyer I met there was a young man named Daniel, quieter than I'd expected, with a habit of writing in the margins of documents as he read them. He was not surprised by anything I told him. The POA revocation is straightforward, he said. We'll file today. The financial exploitation side is more complex. You can report to the Ontario Securities Commission, or the police, or both. You can also pursue a civil claim to recover the funds. Those are 3 separate paths, and you don't have to choose all of them right now. What I want right now, I said, is to make sure they cannot touch anything else. Not my investments, not my remaining accounts, nothing with my name on it. Done. I'll draft an emergency injunction application if you want a court order as backup, though the bank freeze should hold. He looked at me over the margin notes. Do you have somewhere safe to stay? And do they know where that is? That was the right question. I thought about it carefully. Donna's address wasn't in anything Jennifer had access to, not my phone, not my email, not any document I'd signed. But Jennifer was thorough. She'd inherited that from me. I'm not certain, I said. Daniel nodded. There's a support organization I work with. Older adults in displacement situations. They have a confidential intake process. He slid a pamphlet across the desk. You don't have to use it. But it's there. I took the pamphlet. That evening, back at Donna's, my phone began to ring. I watched Jennifer's name appear on the screen and did not answer. Then Greg's. Then Jennifer again. Then a number I didn't recognize with a Mississauga prefix. I turned the phone face down and helped Donna chop onions for soup. Are you scared? Donna asked. Not of them, I said. A little of what I still have to do. She scraped the onions into the pot. You know what I've always said about you, Eleanor? Even when we first met, when you were this tiny thing in a too big wedding dress, you were the calmest person in every room you walked into. I'm not calm, I said. I'm just from a generation that learned to look calm. She laughed. That helped. The next morning, I called the support organization. The woman who answered had a practical voice, not warm in a performed way, just real. She introduced herself as Sandra. She asked what I needed, not what happened to me. And that small difference mattered. I need 2 things, I said. A safe address my daughter can't trace, and help rebuilding my legal documents from scratch. Sandra said, we can do both. Can you come in this afternoon? The office was a converted Victorian row house near the escarpment. Inside it was orderly and quiet, with a front desk volunteer who offered me tea without being asked. Sandra turned out to be small and 50-ish, with short silver hair and the kind of practical efficiency that made you trust her immediately. She listened without notes. When I finished, she said, "You've already done most of the hard work. The bank is frozen. The POA is revoked. You have legal counsel. What you need from us is the administrative layer." Over the next 2 hours, we set up a private mail address through a Canada Post PO box registered to the organization on my behalf. We changed my phone number, something I should have done weeks earlier. We reviewed my provincial health card and federal benefits to confirm Jennifer had no access to those systems. She didn't. There are limits to what even a well-executed enduring POA can touch in Canada, and Jennifer had apparently not found them all. Then, Sandra introduced me to a housing coordinator named Bev, who was large and unhurried and had the manner of someone who'd seen every variation of a difficult situation and remained unshocked by all of them. "I have a unit," Bev said, "subsidized through our transitional program. It's a 1-bedroom in the East End, 2nd floor, elevator in the building, quiet street." She looked at me. "It's yours for up to 6 months while you sort out what comes next financially." "I don't want charity," I said. Not proudly, just clearly. "It's not charity," Bev said. "It's a program your taxes funded for 40 years. Call it your own money coming back." I moved in on a Friday. The apartment had large windows that faced a park. The carpet was old and the tap in the bathroom dripped every 40 seconds, which I knew because I counted, lying in bed the first night, unable to sleep but not in the bad way, in the thinking way, the useful way. I unpacked slowly. I had only what I'd left with 2 cardigans, my coat, the folder. Everything else was still in the room at Jennifer's. My books were there. My husband's photograph was there. The blue and white mixing bowl I'd had since before my children were born. I thought about those things, then I stopped. They were objects. I was still myself. The library 2 blocks away became my anchor. I found it the second morning, following no particular route, just walking in the cold until something looked familiar. The woman at the reference desk was named Greta. Retirement age, volunteer badge, sharp eyes behind wire-framed glasses. She handed me a library card without being asked. "You look like someone who reads," she said. "I taught English for 4 decades, I said. She pointed at a shelf. "We're short-handed on Wednesdays. If you want something to do." I came back on Wednesday. I shelved books. I answered questions from people who needed help using the computers. On Thursday afternoons, there was a reading circle, 6 or 7 women, mostly retired, who worked through a novel every 3 weeks and had opinions about it. I sat in the back the first time and didn't say much. The second time, I pointed out that the author of the book they'd chosen had misunderstood the legal process she'd put in her climax scene, and that the character's lawyer would never have said what she'd written. There was a pause. Then someone said, "How do you know?" And I said, "Because I've recently been through something similar." And the room got quiet in the way rooms get when people recognize truth. They asked me to lead the next discussion. I said yes. It was Greta who told me about my granddaughter. I hadn't known Avery was looking for me. She was 19, Jennifer's younger daughter, and we had always been closer than Jennifer liked. Avery called things by their right names and had her grandmother's habit of reading people carefully. She'd noticed things at the house after I left. She'd ask questions Jennifer didn't answer well. "There's a young woman who's been coming in," Greta said one Tuesday morning, "asking if we have any volunteers named Eleanor Hartwell. I've told her nothing, but I thought you should know." I sat with that for a day. Then I left a message through Greta. If the young woman came back, she could say Eleanor would be at the reading circle Thursday at 2. Avery arrived 10 minutes early. She was taller than I remembered, hair down, coat too thin for December. She saw me across the room and stopped walking, the way people do when they've been looking for something, and suddenly it's there. I let her come to me. She sat down in the chair beside mine and didn't say anything for a moment. Then, "Mom said you had some kind of episode, that you got confused and left in the night, and she's been trying to find you to bring you home." "Is that what she said?" "Yes." Avery looked at her hands. I didn't believe her. "Why not?" "Because I went in your room after you left." The desk drawer was open. She paused. The folder was gone. Someone who's confused doesn't take their important documents. 40 years of teaching told me when to wait. I waited. I also found something in Mom's email, she said quietly. I wasn't snooping. She'd left it open on the kitchen computer. There was a message from Pinecrest with a subject line that said, "Confirm Thursday intake." She looked up. "What was happening on Thursday, Gran?" I told her. "Not everything. Not all the financial details, but the shape of it. The power of attorney. The redirect of my mail. The intake form with the cognitive decline assessment her mother had apparently filled out on my behalf. Avery's face did something complicated. She was 19, which meant she still believed that people she loved should behave better than they did. I remembered that feeling. I didn't try to take it from her. "Your mother isn't a monster," I said carefully. "She's someone who decided that taking care of me meant taking over me, and then it became easier to keep going than to stop. That's not okay." "No, it's not." I put my hand on hers briefly. "But you don't have to fix it. You just have to decide what kind of person you're going to be inside it." She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "Can I visit you again?" "Yes," I said. "Come as yourself, not as anyone's messenger." "I'm always myself," she said, firmly, the way young women say things when they mean them. "Good," I said. "So am I." The letter from Jennifer arrived at Donna's address, not my new one, which told me Jennifer had called someone we both knew and asked. I found out later it was an old neighbor of mine from Guelph, a woman named Pat, who'd given Jennifer the address innocently, not knowing she was helping Jennifer close a trap. I called Pat afterward and explained everything, calmly. Pat cried. I told her it wasn't her fault. That's one of the harder lessons. The people who hurt you use the people who love you, and the people who love you don't always know they're being used. Donna brought me the envelope with raised eyebrows and her reading glasses already on. "I opened it by accident," she said, which we both knew was a lie, and I didn't mind. The letter was written in Jennifer's best handwriting, the formal kind she used for thank you notes. "Mom, we've been sick with worry." Her husband was listed as a co-signatory, which struck me as a choice. "We understand you were upset, and we want to talk through whatever misunderstanding led to this. Everything we've done has been out of love and concern for your well-being. The accounts were set up for your protection. We only wanted to make sure you were cared for. Then. However, the disruption to the household finances has created real problems. Automated payments have failed. Our legal advisor has suggested that if you remain uncontactable, we may need to seek a capacity assessment through the court to ensure your well-being is properly managed." I put the letter on Donna's table. Louis the cat jumped up and sniffed it. "Capacity assessment?" Donna said. "It's a legal process," I said. "A doctor or a court can assess whether someone has the mental capacity to make their own decisions. If they find I don't, a guardian can be appointed. Jennifer would apply to be the guardian. That would be the plan." Donna was quiet for a moment. "Can she do that?" "She can try," I said. "She won't succeed." I called Daniel the next morning. He read the letter over the phone while I waited. "It's a pressure tactic," he said. "A capacity assessment isn't easy to obtain, and the standard of evidence is high. You've been functioning independently, engaging legal counsel, managing your own affairs. Any assessor would see that immediately." A pause. "What they're afraid of is the financial exploitation report we filed. That's what's moving." A capacity assessment is a counter-move. What do? We respond formally. I'll send a letter from my office acknowledging receipt and advising them that any further contact outside of legal channels constitutes harassment. That usually ends it. He paused again. "Also, I want you to consider one more thing. The $22,000 in investment management fees and the $412,000 from your house sale. We can trace where those funds went. If they've been cummilled with Greg's personal accounts, that's recoverable. You don't have to pursue it now, but you should know it's there." I thought about my hostas, the vegetable garden, the 40 years of my husband's savings that had lived in that bungalow. "I'll think about it," I said. I thought about it for 2 days. I walked by the lake both afternoons, watching the ice form at the edges of the water, the way it builds from the shore inward, patient and inevitable. I had not come from a family with money. Everything I had, I'd earned carefully, slowly, a salary and a garden and a house that smelled like the people I loved. They had taken it the way people take things when they believe they deserve what you have more than you do. On the 3rd day, I called Daniel back. "Pursue it," I said. "All of it." The weeks that followed were quieter than I expected. The legal machinery moved slowly, which Daniel had warned me about, and I learned to fill the spaces. I shelved books on Wednesdays. I led the reading circle on Thursdays. Bev, from the housing program, stopped by once a month with paperwork or muffins or both, and we sat at my little kitchen table and talked about ordinary things until they felt ordinary again. Avery visited every second Sunday. She never talked about her parents unless I asked, and I rarely asked. She brought her textbooks sometimes and studied at my kitchen table while I read. We didn't need to fill the silence. That was the inheritance I was most glad to have passed on. My son called in December. My other child, Michael, who lived in Edmonton and worked in oil and gas logistics and had always kept a careful distance from everyone, including me. He said he'd heard things from Avery, that he'd looked into some of it, that he was sorry he hadn't been paying closer attention. "You were living your life," I said. "That's not an excuse." "No," I agreed. "It isn't. But it's also not something to punish yourself for forever." He came for a long weekend in January. We went to the art gallery of Hamilton and had lunch at a diner where the coffee was better than it should have been. He didn't try to fix anything. He didn't make promises he'd have to keep from across 3 time zones. He just showed up, which was the thing I'd always most wanted from the people I loved, and the thing that was hardest to ask for. The financial settlement came through in March. Not everything. The legal system never gives back everything. But enough. Enough to rent properly when the transitional housing period ended. Enough to start a new account in my own name at a branch where no one knew my daughter. Enough to feel that the last of my husband's careful years hadn't entirely vanished. Daniel called to give me the news on a Tuesday morning. I was at the library, reshaping the large print section, which had gotten disorganized over the winter. "It's a fair resolution," he said. "Not perfect, but fair." "Fair is enough," I said. Greta was watching me from across the room with her reading glasses on her head and her arms crossed. When I hung up, she raised one eyebrow. "Good news?" she said. "Decent news," I said, "which is better than most." She handed me a stack of returns to shelve. I took them and got back to work. I don't think about Jennifer every day anymore. Some mornings I do. Some mornings I remember the girl who was afraid of thunderstorms and who learned to read in my lap and who used to draw pictures of our house and put them on the refrigerator with alphabet magnets. That girl is still somewhere inside the woman who tried to sign my name on documents I hadn't read, and I don't know what happened to the distance between those two people. I'm not sure it matters now. What matters is this: the library on Wednesday, the reading circle on Thursday, Donna calling on Sunday evenings to report on Lewis the cat's latest destruction of houseplant, Avery at my kitchen table with her textbooks, Michael's voice from Edmonton, steadier now, learning how to be present from far away, the ice on the lake breaking up in April, that particular green-gray of the water when the cold finally lets go. I do not own a house. I am not certain what comes next, but I am the one deciding what comes next. And that is not a small thing. That is, in fact, everything. There are people reading this who know what it is to watch your name get used without you. To feel the quiet management of your own life, the way your choices get narrowed down until the hallway is very thin and everyone around you is very sure they know what's best. I want to say this to you plainly, the way I would have said it to a student sitting in the back of my classroom, certain that what was happening to them was too complicated to change. You still have capacity. You still have rights. And in this country, there are people whose job is to help you use both. You don't have to understand the whole legal system. You don't have to be brave in a dramatic way. You just have to take the first step, which might only be picking up the phone, or walking into a bank branch, or telling one honest person what's actually happening. And if they tell you that you're confused, that you're tired, that you don't understand, remember this. You are allowed to know what you know. You were there. You remember. And no one, not a daughter, not a husband, not a very well-worded letter from a lawyer in Mississauga, can take that from you unless you let them. I didn't let them. You don't have to either. If this story sat with you, leave a comment below. And if there's someone in your life who needs to hear it, send it to them. You might be the first person who does.